Hello, and welcome to SSON's Executive Webinar Series. My name is Barbara Hodge, and I'm your host for today, and truly delighted to welcome all of you to this webinar sponsored by TCN, one of the leading cloud-based call center technology platforms for enterprises, contact centers, BPOs, and collection agencies. Within the shared services world, one challenge practitioners are constantly coming up against is how to get the best return from their contact centers. To help you, we've invited some experts to explain what you can do to improve your performance. This webinar is titled How to Use Business Intelligence and Analytics for Call Centers, and it touches on one of the hottest trends this year, data analytics and business intelligence. I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers today, namely Dave Beddoes, who is Vice President of Business Intelligence at TCN and who has more than 10 years of experience in the industry. Dave has been at the forefront of call center technology, spearheading strategic partnerships around the world. Presenting a case study for us today is Steve Larson, Senior Dialer Manager and QA Supervisor for Advance Financial. Steve has extensive expertise in IT programming, operational intelligence, contact center reporting, and metrics. At Advance Financial, Steve manages the call center operations, including campaigns and call lists, real-time reporting, and adhering to all state and federal regulations. Before we start, I'd like to remind all of you that this is a live webinar, and I would invite you to ask any questions you have, which Dave and Steve will be more than happy to address at the end of today's session. Dave, I'll now hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara. I appreciate it. We are so grateful to have you all here today, this morning, or this afternoon, where you are in the nation or in the world. We'd like to have a moment just to cover the agenda and give you an idea of some of the topics that we will be covering. Business intelligence is a very hot topic in call centers today. It seems that there's a desperate need for call centers to be able to really dig in and understand not only what's happening on the call floor, but also understand how to make adjustments and address any of the changes or any of the trends that are happening in the call center that are not desirable. So here's the agenda today. We're going to cover some of the main purposes of business intelligence and analytics. Sometimes those two phrases, can seem a little overpowering and a little scary to some, and you might think that, hey, do I need to be a data scientist to understand this? And that's the whole point of what we are bringing to the table to you today, is to help you understand that technology has advanced to a point to where it really is at your fingertips to be able to understand and to use business intelligence. Now, a little of my background, I do happen to be, some might call, a little bit of a data geek or a data scientist, if you want to call it that. My undergraduate was in psychology, specifically in learning behavior. So, you know, I did have some classes back in the day where they handed me a pigeon and asked me to teach that pigeon to do certain behaviors, even things that approximated reading, by holding up different colors or presentation charts or cards to that pigeon, and with a little bit of incentive in the form of food pellets, I was able to help shape that behavior of that pigeon to get it to do what I needed it to do. Now, I don't want to minimize the work that many of you all do with your call floors, but isn't that very similar? In fact, many of the tools and many of the things that I've used in my professional life have been very helpful in my family life, and I'll be very, very honest. My behavioral science and behavioral analytics has been very helpful with my kids, and they are pretty normal, but I can try to influence their behavior just like we do with our agents on our call floor. So a lot of things that are quite interesting when you get into behavior and when you get into analyzing how people perform. And that's really what we hope to share with you today is just how that can be simplified, and then how you can leverage that for your benefit in your current position as well as at your current company, and how to influence the direction your company is taking. So we'll share a couple of case studies with you where the tools that are at your disposal now, we're able to help with multiple tier support, and also understanding the service levels that you might have with your company. Those are some very interesting case studies, but really one of the biggest focuses today will be Steve Larson, one of our clients, and his experience with business intelligence. I think you'll find it fantastic. So just a brief snapshot of TCN and what we do. We are a call center technology company, and the long and short of it is we focus on efficiency of your biggest resource, which is your agent productivity. Because of our tools really help you identify and shorten and connect agents with consumers faster than any other product out on the market. That turns around into less wait time for your customer, for the agent, less non-productive calls, higher connectivity of conversations, and higher quality of conversations. So we focus on doing more with less. It's a very nimble call center platform, and we're not going to talk too much of that today. We're focusing on our business intelligence and really what to look for when you're looking for applying business intelligence to your situation. But the results that we're all after is a better customer experience or a better consumer experience, higher productivity, which leads to happier agents, less turnover, and less agent training costs as well. So business intelligence. Really, it is changing how call centers conduct business. Call center with the combination of a call center platform that is highly efficient and the ability to see what is happening in that call center platform, the combination of those two is unstoppable, and it really takes businesses to the next level. Today, in that, we're going to share with you how both what I would call the functionality of a call center platform, with the inbound calls, the outbound calls, how the agents log in, how they go on break, or how they're managed. All of that has to be visible to management, to supervisors, has to be manageable and visible to your C-level suite of people, as well as you have to be able to, in many cases, deliver those deliverables to your clients to conduct business. And really, we feel that business intelligence has raised what is possible in call centers today. You can only improve what you can see and measure. If you can't see it, you can't improve it. And so what we've found, and what's very interesting, is many times as we are helping implement business intelligence, as we're consulting with our clients, your call center managers will have a gut feeling, or they'll just know that something is either working well or it's not working well, but they may not be able to show that. There used to be an old way of doing that. Before today, it used to be that data mining and business intelligence with big data from call centers has generally been out of reach. And this is so for a few reasons. One, big data is big, right? It's just, by its very nature, there's a lot of data. And that means that it's very difficult to manipulate and interpret that data. How do you see millions and millions of phone calls in a month and be able to access that? Well, historically, that meant data dumps. Somebody, usually requiring IT and some SQL or some other training, would have to export some data dumps and be able to import that into a database, access or for crystal reports, or even just trying to do it the old-fashioned way and using Excel. But I'm sure that there are many on this call today that have actually crashed Excel numerous times by trying to manipulate large quantities of data and just using pivot tables and filtering and other such tools to be able to perform their tasks. This takes too much time, and it's really pulling you away from the job that you were actually hired to do, which is usually managing people and training people. And now you're spending a vast majority of your weeknights and weekends actually trying to crunch data so you can see the information and have the tools at your disposal to go ahead and do your job. Big data has come along, and there are companies out there that do offer you business intelligence. But what's been common in the industry is that data has still had to be exported. And so that process usually takes 6 to 9 months for an implementation. It's very expensive, and there's a lot of consultation that has to go back and forth between your company and the so-called experts for them to come back and say, well, here's what the data is telling us. And the problem with that, among the other points that I've just listed, is that it really misses a whole wealth of data that has a short shelf life. There's so much data and so much gut reactions and gut feelings that really need to be explored in an on-demand setting. And so with the combination that we're offering with business intelligence married into the call center platform, it actually gives you that immediacy to the data to chase down any gut reaction that you might have. So let's actually just get into that a little bit. I'm going to show you what's possible and what our clients are using today. And I think you're going to get the feel of really what's capable and what's possible for call centers, and how this can translate all the way down to the agent level and really carry over to your clients for performance and functionality. Imagine that your managers and your team members can have access to an on-demand tool to interpret the data. You have the ability to select as much data as you want, focus in on specific days or month to month, year to year. Maybe you only want to look at Tuesdays for the past year. You select the data that you'd like to look at, and we're actually talking about millions and millions of calls where I can toggle between my time periods just with the click of a mouse, and I can look at the last 6 months of worth of data and see it in various presentations. Now, we call this our dashboard. Our dashboard contains personalized, and actually we have several dashboards that can come pre-configured, but usually we configure those specifically to our clients' needs. That process is very short, and the onboarding is really just a matter of days to do this. But once that data is available, then the client can manipulate that data as they would. What typically happens is they'll have a series of insights that are very interesting to them or important to them, and then they can drill in and focus on a particular insight or piece of data that they'd like to look at. And in fact, one of the huge differences of having business intelligence at your fingertips is that you can manipulate that data and even focus on different things. What you're going to find is that as you study your own call center floor, you're going to find different trends. If I change this to an hour, let's actually go to a day view. Well, let's do a week view over the past 6 months. I may find from week to week that I have some interesting trends that are happening. And I may find that, why is it that on the 1st of February, we're down a little bit? I may have a gut feeling on this, or I may not, but what business intelligence allows you to do is it allows you to add or to investigate that insight. So maybe I'm going to say, why is our production dipping at this point? Well, let's add one more thing on here that maybe I want to look at, oh, I don't know, productivity or talk time. Let's just do talk time. So if I look at my talk duration, oh, there it was, I just missed it. Talk duration. So if I can pull any bit of data that I have on the call center platform, I don't have to export it, and I can just add that as a data point on the system. Now I can investigate my trend and take a look at that and say, hey, here's my talk time as well. So it's interesting that our production is dipping, but my talk time is remaining the same. Or whatever the scenario is, business intelligence really allows you to investigate and personalize your data and see it in a different way. And maybe that's not the right way to present that data after you've got done investigating it. So perhaps let's just make a quick modification and change the way that data is presented. Now I can see that quite a bit differently, and whether I'm going to talk to my CEO and trying to explain, hey, you know what, we really had a dip in December, but it's obvious because our production time or our agent time actually dipped, and so therefore those two things are related. Let's investigate that a little bit more. So really what we've seen as we work with our clients is that business intelligence really opens the door for you to investigate how to increase productivity and efficiency with your team members. Before, it was impossible to personalize your key metrics and performance evaluation on one screen, and now we're giving that to our clients. Let me just zip through a couple other examples. You can see how I don't want to go too extensive. I want to get into some other things here, but there's a lot of ways where you can present your data, whether it's charts or graphs, and whether it's by the day, by the hour, where you're looking at trends, but or even by the calls. This one down here, this is 1,000 of the most frequently called or most frequent incoming calls by individual phone number. Each one of these ticks on the bottom is a different phone number, and it shows how many times they've either been called for the duration of time that we're looking at, or how many times they've called in. And so with this particular example, we're actually helping our clients identify bad phone numbers or non-productive phone numbers. So we're helping them analyze when is it time to give up on calling a particular number, and when does that not be profitable anymore. So with that, it's quite interesting where we can get into specific call results, and we can take that a step further and go to, we can go into even personalize that and add in agent information and agent costs. So you may have some fixed costs that you know of on a per seat level, and we can merge that into any of these insights and really customize that to your situation, and even get into an understanding that says if you call that phone number 10 times in a month, on the 11th time it becomes unprofitable, no matter what the result is. Or if you've had so many results in one category, it's still profitable, or you're still handling that properly. So there's a lot of really fascinating things that we can get into, but it comes down to personalizing the experience and getting in one-on-one with each of our clients and understanding what their needs are, and then we personalize the experience to their needs. Let me just take a quick look here. I want to get into this first case study to show you, as now you get a flavor of what's possible. But let's see how that works in real life. This first case study, we had a client that wanted to go from a manual calling scenario where they weren't getting enough penetration in the records. They weren't contacting enough of the people that they were contracted in contacting. And so they switched, and actually, instead of just calling the individuals manually dialing, they wanted to use predictive dialing, but they still needed to have agent ownership. And they all absolutely needed to make sure that no calls were abandoned. So what we did is, with our platform, it was actually very easy for us to set up a 4-tier overflow, to where any outbound call, if Tier 1 was the individual agent, if that agent was occupied or busy, then it would flow over to Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4, as you can see. The call would be answered by any agent in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3, or Tier 4. It would be answered within 500 milliseconds. So there was no challenge with that being answered by the next available live agent. But here's how we played that out, and you can see how we were helping them to actually see and to manage how many of the calls went to Tier 1, and then therefore they could either speed up or slow down their calling pacing to be able to ensure that a certain percentage of the calls went to the owner agent. And so they were actually pretty aggressive with a 70% ownership for the primary owner. But you can see here how only one call went to Tier 4, and therefore they didn't have any abandons. And you can see that the amount of wait time was also nominal as well. So that's just one case study. We'll go to the results of that by just to help you understand that if you can see it, you can measure it, you can improve it. And here's what they were able to do. They went from, just giving you a couple numbers here, the transition period was this green line right here. In the red, we have production hours, how many agent hours they were using. In the blue, we have daily right party contact counts. And so you can see clearly that there was a decrease of production hours and an increase of right party contacts. Just to give you the numbers, before TCN they had about 220 agent production hours per day. That was reduced to 130. Well, actually, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. 220 agent hours produced 130 right party contacts a day. After implementing, they dropped their production hours to 120 production hours to reach about 220 right party contacts a day. So it went from about 0.7 right party contacts per agent hour to an increase of 1.9 right party contacts per agent hour. It's a 270% increase in right party contacts per agent hour. So not to surprise anybody, but they were very, very happy with that, and they were happy that they could see that and actually track that on a day-by-day and hour-by-hour basis. Case study number 2 was a service level agreement. We had a new client come on board that was very concerned with avoiding fines by missing their service level agreements that they had contractually with the client. And as we got them onboarded, we were noticing that they were not meeting their service levels, and they needed help understanding. This was in the healthcare service provider. Their fines were quite steep, and they really needed help to understand what was actually happening on the floor. So we got to work with understanding and studying the issue. I know this is very small, very hard to see, but I want you to understand that within the hour of meeting with them, we started to build out individual insights that we added onto a dashboard page for the client that we had back to them in about an hour's time, where they were able to see their call count, how many calls were abandoned, the average duration of hold time for the abandoned calls, the abandoned percentages, how many agents they had, their average service time to answer the call, how long were they answering each of the calls, and on and on and on. So what we found is as we worked together with the client, we started out with basic key performance indicators, but got quite advanced into understanding and following the trail of what was the root cause of why they were not meeting their performance expectations. And down here in this insight, we got to the point to where we helped understand that they were actually spending 21% of the agent's login time was on break, in pause. And we were able to help identify not only the teams, but the individual agents that were really causing havoc with their service level agreements on their answer times. So once again, if you can't see it, if you can't measure it, you can improve it. And so now with these tools, the client was able to really set clear expectations and understand what their hiring practices needed to be in order to meet their SLAs. Case study number 3 is just simply a agent performance case study. Let's see if I can pull that one up right here. I've got that right here. Let me go to this particular insight. So you're probably very familiar, and I'll zoom in on this so you can see it a little more, but you're probably very familiar with, I think I zoomed in way too much. Let me try that again. You're probably very familiar with various key performance indicators that you use in the call center floor, wait time, occupancy, conversion time, those types of things, average speed to answer. But what we've done for this particular client and all of our clients, this is actually one of our standard dashboards now, is we've got to the point where we merge those key performance indicators on one page so that they can use them and see different trends and different views. Because if you just go in and you say, I'm going to evaluate my agent and I want to see who has the shortest wrap-up time or post-call time, that tells you one story, but it doesn't quite tell you the whole story. And it may not tell you who your best agents are. And maybe you have a few different categories of best agents and what success really means to you. And in this case, that was very true. This was an accounts receivable management company charged with collecting old debt. And we have right party contacts, we have promise to pays, and they also had actual payments collected. What was interesting was we were able to redefine their whole commission structure and actually have it based on direct observable behavior. In this case, they can now see how much face value debt they had on conversations with people that were the right party only. So now I can go to one agent and say, hey, you had the chance to collect on $11,000 worth of debt. How did you do? Versus, well, they took 1,300 calls in that time period. Is that good or bad? I can't tell you. And then the fascinating thing is we merged all of those key performance indicators into a specific score where that agency could clearly rank their agents by score, where they merged the individual key performance indicators that were most important to them. They were able to weigh those either lighter or heavier and then come up with an actual score for the agent. And you can see this is not very difficult to work with. If you can work with Excel, you can work with business intelligence. So key to that is the consulting part. I'm going to go, let's just go to the main part of this presentation and invite Steve Larson to join us. I'm going to ask Steve a couple of common questions, very specific to business intelligence, so you can hear his experience with business intelligence. Steve, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Steve. Could you describe what your main role is with Advanced Financial?
Well, I'm the dialer manager and QA supervisor, but I also run our telephony department, and I do various reporting for a lot of the managers and executive teams.
Great. So that keeps you pretty busy, I guess.
It does. Not as busy now that I have business intelligence.
Well, you know, it's interesting how you described your position. I think many on this call that are dealing with call floors find that not only are they expected to manage team members, but they're also expected to produce reports. That's kind of an understood question, but why do you feel, Steve, that that's a main point of your role? Why is it both managing people as well as producing reports?
Well, I mean, that's just what's expected of you in this environment. When you're in a call center environment, everybody knows your managers are expected to produce numbers, but they're also expected to produce reports, train individuals. it's just a lot expected of the managers when they go in and do it. And usually when you improve on one, another one tends to slide off a little bit, and you're not as, you just don't run as good of numbers. You can do one of two things. You can focus on your agents, or you can focus on your reports, but very rarely do you see managers that are able to do both. And in my position, you take that into account, and then you run a telephony system for an entire call center and 70+ stores. It's hard to get things done.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it then. How has business intelligence changed your work? What was it like before, and what was it like since you've actually implemented and been using business intelligence?
Well, prior to this, I would have to do data dumps and, drop a lot of spreadsheets into Excel, manipulate the data, do pivot tables. And for me, a lot of it was just doing work when I got home. In order for me to make sure I provided everything that everybody wanted, I would have to do this, during family time, is what I like to say. So it's cut my daily workload in half. It's very, very simple and easy to use. If you can go in and do pivot tables and you can do Excel formulas, you'll catch on to this in no time. And obviously by having this, I no longer have to do those SFTP file dumps, having to manipulate data into Excel, and spend that much time on it.
Now, can I expound on that? Why has that been simplified? I'm going to bring over to here. Here's one of your insights that you actually use on a day-to-day basis. We've manipulated. I've gone through and I've actually messed with the formulas a little bit so that we're not showing your exact and real numbers. It is real data, but it's all mixed in together with, I've thrown in some things to so it's actually not your real numbers. But
right.
This is one of your insights that you're using today.
And it tells me almost everything that I want to see, for specific agents. But I mean, you can tell calls on a daily basis, how many connects they're getting, certain dispositions they use. We break things down. I want to know dollars collected today, how many promise to pays they have, and then I have another insight that tells me on average, dollars collected per promise to pay. So, we have that information as well, calls versus connects, and then in the end, you're able to calculate all of that, and I can see my return on investment per agent.
So wait, let me clarify that, because I think that is very, I think that's one of the strongest points we've seen as I've worked with numerous agencies and companies, is that you're actually able to get it all the way down to your return on your investment. In this case, this is an agent level. These numbers over here on the left represent individual agents. So for a particular time period, you can actually see how much that agent is giving you on what you're spending to them. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. And in this type of environment, I work. I've always been in accounts receivables, but when you're in that environment, if your agents aren't producing, why do you have them? And it's pretty cut and dry. I know it sounds evil, but in this type of environment, that's what you want to know: bottom cost and what's your return on your investment.
And Steve, I know you haven't had this implemented too long, this particular insight, and it's probably something to do with my calculations as I've manipulated the data further to kind of screen your real numbers. But what does it mean to be able to produce this report and give that to the floor and allow them to go to an agent and be able to see how that individual agent stacks up against the other agents.
Exactly, and when you produce this and you give it to your management team, one of two things: either you kind of feel that either you have an agent that doesn't care, they're happy with, I don't know, their hourly wage that they're making, they're not trying to better themselves, or let's say get a bonus check. And then, so one of two things: you either have an agent like that, or the manager needs to spend more time training to help improve that agent. But when you also present that information to the agent, then your agent will be more apt to go out and try to improve themselves as well.
Yeah, thanks. I just showing you a couple of different ways to see this information, and it's quite one thing to go to an agent and say, hey, I feel like you're not hitting your numbers, and here's what you've collected. But when you can compare that to the actual agent hours and how long they've been logged in, and really get down to some interesting metrics like you've got on your screen, I think it's a fun time to be in our business, I think. Let me go to the next question.
It's a lot easier.
So let's talk about that a little further. It seems like we've helped you recover some of your family time, which is tremendous. And I expect a thank you card for Christmas, Steve. But I think we appreciate you having come in and joining us on this webinar. So that'll be good enough. But what does it mean? Before I get to this question, would you be able, if you were crunching your numbers on nights and weekends, would that keep you from investigating different trends that you thought, hey, why are we doing this, or why is that happening? Would it just be a little overpowering to try and tackle that?
It would. You wouldn't be able to look at all the information, and you wouldn't be able to look at all the data. The things that you have to provide to management, or you have to provide to your executive team, when you go out and you do that, that's all you're consumed with. You're trying to get that done. And anybody knows that in call center environments, if managers or executive teams ask for something, it's usually not, they don't just want it once a week or twice a week. It's usually every day, or and then when they want it now. It's not a matter of, just give it to me whenever you get a chance. They usually ask for stuff, they want it now. And a lot of times you get, it happens last minute as well.
So what does that mean for you now? So what does that mean for you now to be able to just simply log in and pull the same insight, or to be able to manipulate it a little bit within minutes and then hand that to the executive?
Yeah, it's night and day difference. But not only that, everybody knows that you go out and you'll run, you'll give them this information for a day or for a week, and then they'll come back and they'll say, well, can I have this month over month? Or can I have this, in comparison?
Let's do that month over month. Year. Let's see here. So to get a month over month, we'll do last 6 months, and we'll change this to date and time interval. We'll see if this works for your data. Might not work for your data, but if we change that and just go month over month. But you get the general idea that, it looks like we've got an agent report here. But you get the general idea that it's a little easier to produce.
Right. So, it's very, very simple, very easy to use. It's, on the fly visibility. It's not, you're not spending all this additional time working on these reports. So it frees up a lot of time in order to focus on the things you have to focus on.
I'll ask a separate question to that, and hopefully none of your coworkers are on the call with you, but because you were doing a lot of this on nights and weekends, do you think you've ever made any mistakes with your deliverables?
I would like to say no. but I'm sure
we'll let you say
sure
no.
that
That's okay.
Yeah.
I know that there are others out there that you know, get a little tired or actually make mistakes, and like you said, repetitive tasks when you're dealing with Excel pivot tables are not always consistent. And
Right.
you know, now you have this ability where any of these insights can be repeated just by pulling on them. So let's go back to this questioning then. On this question, this next question, we know it's affected you, but how is this affecting your business? Has this helped your company at all?
Absolutely, in more ways than one. But you know, one, it's easier to go out and test new strategies. You can implement a strategy, then you can go back and review and do a comparison and see what has actually worked as opposed to what you've done prior. That would be one. Two, providing the information to the managers as opposed to the managers going out and running the reports themselves. And even for me, because I have enough issues with our telephone system, but it frees up a lot of time in order for you to do what you need to focus on. Managers should just focus on training their people and trying to improve their people, because the bottom line is you improve your people, it improves your bottom line. You know, it's going to increase your money, and that's what everybody wants. But your managers, if you have your managers spending half the day running reports, they're obviously not focused on their people. They're not watching the people, and then in the end, we want to know why, you know, we don't make enough, or we don't hit our projected numbers based on, I don't know, based on what we'll say we did the year before or the month before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not, because managers are running reports. They're not training their people, and they're not watching their people. And
well, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, if you think of a dialer manager, and if you go in to be hired as a dialer manager, you would expect that your main job is to work with the agents and manage and train and help those members. And you know, before BI, how much if you were spending 50% of your time in reports, and that's actually after hours work, I know that's a very common occurrence. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about the fact that one of the biggest benefits of BI is actually getting managers back in touch with their agents, if I can paraphrase you there.
And you touched on earlier, going in and looking at bad numbers that you've dialed, and having that information, and how many times a number is bad, or how many times you get a connect out of X amount of dials, you know, throughout the month, and we know what numbers are bad, we can actually go back, and you're sending a concentrated list of phone numbers, you know, out for waterfall hits, instead of, like right now, you know, I'm sure not all companies, but I'm sure you have some companies, well, if I get X amount of 3 dial tones and we don't get an answer, you know, we're just sending that out. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad number. But in this instance, I can go in and I can check, and I can tell you what numbers are bad and what numbers I'm going to send out for my waterfall hits, and that I want good numbers sent back to me. And right now, there's a lot of companies out there that don't do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other, I mean, really insights and visibility into making business decisions and strategy decisions. How are you going to process your, you know, what you're going to work? So, hey, we're coming up on a quarter till, and I know there's some questions out there for us. Let's thanks, Steve, for sharing that. Let's turn the time back over to Barbara. If you have some questions for us, or Barbara, if you want to have some comments.
Absolutely, Dave, thank you, and also Steve, really great discussion between the two of you. So let me bring in a few questions, and feel free to let that lead into additional discussion, because I think, hearing what Steve's experienced firsthand is really incredibly valuable. Here's one of the questions that we just got. What are the common KPIs used to measure the effectiveness of call center performance? Steve, could I put that one out to you?
Sure. In my instance, I mean, obviously, Dave has one of my reports pulled up here, but I mean, everything. I mean, I've probably gone above and beyond as far as doing the calculated accrual and agent salary and ROI. But most common in the call center technology, I mean, we want to know, promise to pay amounts, percentage of calls versus promise to pay, calls versus connects versus right party contacts, things of that nature. So, I mean, I actually just implemented all of these and put them in one report, as opposed to, sitting there trying to make 5 reports with individual ones and trying to combine them all into one Excel sheet.
Seeing them in one view, Steve, does that tend to, do you find that some of your managers hone in on one metric versus another? Or do they, I mean, they seem to tell different stories sometimes.
From what I see, not just managers, but even from the executive team, they want one report. Nobody wants to sit here and look at 5 or 6 different spreadsheets throughout the day.
Yeah.
Or, prior to this, what I would do is I would have 4 or 5 spreadsheets, and I actually have 3 monitors, and I have them all up on my monitors at the same time. So not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah. Great.
Dave, what about, can I just add on, as you work with other clients, have there been any other specific KPIs that folks have found particularly impactful or useful?
Barbara, I've got the best job in the world, because I get with our clients, and they are experts in their business. They know their business inside and out. And so one of the first things that we do when we get with them is we just understand what are the top 3 things that they want to do, and they want to understand with reporting and with insights and with agents and their business. And they're always going to have a top 3 list. And that is so fun to dissect and get into, but it usually comes back to the same metrics. I mean, I've spent months, and as Steve says, I've got 3 different computer screens, and I had an insight that had 60 different metrics on it that I thought were all very, very interesting. They all told different stories. But then I stopped for a minute and I said, well, you know what? These are all interesting, but let's get back to business here. What's going to affect the performance of a company? And so they really circle under 3 things. One is your staff. How is your staff being efficient? How do you measure their efficiency? 2 is your system. Is your system functioning properly for that day or for that time period? And then the 3rd is, how is your strategy being measured? So there are variations of all that, but I think for the different industries that we serve, we've gotten into some best practices, suggestions where we can come to the table and help initiate a discussion and say, here's what some of the other companies are doing in your sector. Let's take that and personalize that to your situation.
Yeah, and I think that's the real value, right? Being able to leverage the experience you have across different organizations and bring that to someone who's considering moving forward with some automation.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Let me move on to the next question. How long does it take to deploy something like TCN's business intelligence solutions, and how much training does this require? Dave.
Oh, Steve, I'm going to put that on you. What was your experience like?
I want to say it was deployed within a day, and once I got in and I start messing around with it, I mean, obviously you're going to have some questions, but then it was just explained to me that formulas were very similar to Excel, and once they told me that, I was just in there, and it was very, very simple and very easy to use. You know, you can go in and you can look at the sum of X amount of calls, or you know, whether or not it's inbound, outbound. It's very simple. Everything is point and click, so instead of typing in the physical formula, all you're going in and just doing a mouse click and selecting from a drop-down list. It's very, very simple, very easy to use.
So remember, this is hugely different than having to export the data. Steve has all of his call center data points. That's already in his account, and so we're just giving him a utility to access those and display those and manipulate those at will. So that's completely different than having to work with an outside company and export your data.
I just wanted to follow on, Steve. In terms of training, how did you address that for your team?
Well, when it comes to this here, BI, it was very simple. I have, you know, I have a couple of individuals that work with me, and deploying it to the managers and explaining it to them. You'll have some managers who are excited and they wanna try it out and you know, do different reports themselves. And then you'll have some managers that are like, thank goodness I don't have to do any more worksheets. And they just say, hey, can you run this for me and give it to me the next day?
Yep. Yep. Thanks very much, Steve, for that. Let me jump on to the next question. I understand the value of business intelligence in call center operations, but how can we provide insights and value to other departments within my company? And do you have any examples? Steve, can I start with you?
Sure, that's fine. For us, we have everybody on, you know, within TCN. So as Dave was explaining with the data points, those data points include every group within the call center. And you can actually go in, you can look at transferred calls, the amount of transferred calls. You can drill that down by agents. If I see an influx of, and I'll use this is actually an example. This actually just started happening to us a day or two ago. But we would have a certain group that just had an influx of inbound calls. Well, it just so happens that I have agents that were in another group who really didn't want to work, and they were taking calls and they were just dropping them to another department. So various things that you can actually go in and look at on here and just kind of see the call flow for your entire call center and control everything, but have it all in one place.
Barbara, I'm going to add to that too with some of the experience of some other companies that we've dealt with. They're actually using these insights for client deliverables. If you imagine, most companies in the call center world have to report to their clients certain metrics as well. So they have to report performance and be accountable for certain metrics. And so to be able to simplify that and just have metrics that are just available on demand, but that are very personalized to that particular client, is another value add for the company.
Steve, I think the final question we have today Dave, the final question today actually feeds on from your response just now. Can you show me good examples of reporting formats that I could present to my superiors, including C-level executives? So how could you expand on what you've just told us?
Oh, sure. You know, it really comes down to what we start with. What's needed, what's desired. Is it a chart? Is it a graph? Is it a table? And then if it is a chart, that chart can be exported, or the graph can be exported as an image, and in various ways, whether it's a PDF or just a JPEG or something like that. And then the actual tables can be exported as CSVs as well. So you can actually export those, and then if you needed to further manipulate those, you could. But a lot of our clients are adopting our standard offerings and in just maybe changing different color schemes. As you can see here, I have a lot of options of displaying and using different chart types and actually merging chart types to hone in on the data that I'd like to display and tell the story that I really want to tell and highlight. So just as a quick blanket statement, you know, that it depends on, we have some canned offerings, but those can be personalized to tell the story that you really want to tell.
Mm-hmm. Steve, anything you would add about what format has been most impactful on your end?
Working with the executive team here, they're probably the first executive team that I've worked with who prefers not to look at charts and not to look at graphs. So for me, it's as simple as pulling the data, exporting the sheet, and providing it to them. But either way, you have so many options, and like I said, everything is flexible and it's very easy to use. And on-the-fly visibility, you can go back, you know, X amount of days, months, doesn't matter. And just provide that information with the ease of use and being able to pull the information that you want. It's been a huge difference in how I look at you know, a lot of the basically the day-to-day processes. It has changed everything, how I view everything. You know, when I go in and run these reports now.
Thank you, Steve. That brings us to the top of the hour, so I'm afraid I'm going to close out this webinar, but I wanted to thank our speakers today, Dave Beathers and Steve Larson, very much for the time they've taken to address the developments in contact centers. I want to thank TCN very much for sponsoring this webinar, and I want to thank all of you who have logged in today for taking part in this session. Our webinars are very important to us as they're a means of promoting some of the best practices that exist in the marketplace to you, our members, and we always strive to ensure that we're providing you the information that you need. So thanks to everyone for your time today. This concludes today's webinar.